Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make this cute patriotic birdhouse card using some stamps from our sponsor Rubber Stamp Tapestry. I'm using this Country Lane set as well as the Stars and Stripes Forever set for the main stamps here. I'm also going to use the chickens from Down on the Farm because that's such a cute set too, and I think they go really well together. So I'm also going to be using Distress Oxide inks, and they are 25% off this week at Rubber Stamp Tapestry. Use the coupon code DISTRESS25, and the coupon is only good through June 26th, so don't wait if you want to get those ink pads at a really fantastic price. And the regular price is pretty good anyway, so 25% off, that's like a no-brainer. So what I'm going to do here is just take my rubber stamp off the block, and I'm laying it on my paper, and I'm just going to indicate the edges of the birdhouse because I'm going to be stamping a little row of those heart flags across, and I want to make sure I don't go overboard. So I just made a couple little marks with my pencil, and if they end up showing, I'll just erase them at the end. And then you just put your stamp right back on your block so it's ready when we are ready to do our stamping there. So what we're going to do for our little flag stamp here, our little heart flag, is we're going to ink them up with a marker. Now you could use a couple tiny ink pads for this. That would be really easy to do, but I always have my water-based markers on my pen rack on my table, so this was easy for me to grab. So what you want to do is color the area of the stamp you want to be blue with your blue marker, and color the striped area, which you want to be red, with the red marker. It's pretty simple. Now with a small stamp like that, if you have a nice juicy marker, you don't need to blow on it or anything. You can just go ahead and stamp. But if you're working on a larger image that takes longer to color, you might want to just kind of, it's called huffing on the stamp. You just breathe on it, and the moisture from your breath will re-moisten all the ink. But when you're working with something small like this, it really doesn't need that. But just to let you know, because this is a fantastic technique to use on your larger stamps. Saves a lot of time. And I just stamped that 4 times across so that I would have a cute little bunting at the front of my birdhouse after I stamp it. The reason we stamped our bunting first is because we're going to do a technique called masking, and that allows you to protect something that you stamped first, stamp on top of it, and the thing you stamp on top appears to be behind. So what I've done here is just stamped that little heart, those little hearts 4 times on the sticky part of a Post-it note, and then I'm going to cut them out. After you've cut out each heart shape, just simply stick them down onto the hearts that you stamped on your cardstock, and that's going to protect it so you can stamp right on top of it without having to worry about ruining your design. Now you want to ink up your main stamp with some ink, and I'm using Ranger Archival ink because I intend to color my image with water-based markers and I don't want it to smear later. So I'm very carefully lining my stamp up over the area where I protected my bunting, and I'm just stamping it so that when I peel off the masks, my little flags will be hanging right across the front of the birdhouse. If you've never done masking before, I really encourage you to try it because there is nothing like peeling off the mask and seeing your cute little designs protected, and it's really a great way to make a 3-dimensional image. Now that you have the basic masking technique down, we're going to do some more masking. First, I'm just going to take a piece of Post-it note and mask right across that kind of ledge of the birdhouse, kind of where the food would be, I guess, or flowers would be planted. And then I'm going to stamp that birdhouse again on my sticky note and cut it out and protect the top part of the birdhouse. And I totally just realized that I could have saved a Post-it note by just stamping the birdhouse and cutting it all out and sticking it down. You don't need to use 2 Post-it notes. I guess I thought I was just going to mask off the ledge and not do the house, and I was a little lazy, so, you know, you only need 1 Post-it note, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. So now that we've protected the birdhouse and all that bunting area, we can be really free about stamping. So I'm using these flowers from the Stars and Stripes Forever set, and I'm just stamping a nice full arrangement in both boxes. Now I probably should have turned that stamp a little bit one of those times because they're looking very identical, and it's nice to have variety. So I'm really making sure that when I do these other smaller images from the set that I kind of varied a little bit. Now I did get a big old fingerprint in the sky there, but I'm not going to worry about it because that's just an opportunity for embellishing or an opportunity to put a background in, I figure. So it's all good. You should never be stressed out when you're card making. You should really have a good time with it. Now I like to kind of repeat that red and blue theme because it is a 4th of July card. Well, it's a thank you card, but it could be given at 4th of July. So I like to kind of recycle those colors as much as possible. And I've already decided what pattern paper I'm going to use, so I just make sure I'm keeping it in that scheme so everything's going to go. It's always easier to pick your paper first than to pick your ink. So here I'm just going in with this beautiful olivey green color and stamping in some of the vines from that same stamp set and really just filling in that box. Since I have protected my birdhouse, I can go to town with those stamps and not have to worry about stamping on top of something I want to color later. And then voila, we remove our masks and we see that our birdhouse is still pristine. I think one of the most versatile tools for coloring are water-based markers, and you can even use the kids' Crayola markers for this. So what I like to do is just scribble it out onto a acrylic block, and what this does is it gives me a palette, and I can use that to paint from. So I have a clear marker, and you can get these either made by Tombow, Stampin' Up, or you can use a Dove blender. And what I'm doing is I am just using this clear marker, it's got like a clear ink in it, to pick up my color from my palette and then spread it around. Now the reason I like to do this is because sometimes when you go directly in and color with a marker, you get way too dark of an impression or it gets really streaky. So this allows you to control it. And you can also mix other colors in and get kind of a two-tone effect like I'm going to do with this kind of lighter reddish brown marker. Let me remind you that you can use whatever color medium you prefer, whether it be Copic markers, watercolors, chalks, you name it. Just make sure whatever you decide to stamp with is a use. Another thing I really like about working with the water-based markers, using a clear marker to spread it with, is that you can go back in and you can fill in gaps, you can add more shadows if you want to, like I'm doing here with this darker brown, and you can get it just right. I recommend you use a fairly robust cardstock for this. If you're not going to put a lot of layers, regular old office supply cardstock will be great, but if you are going to do a lot of wet techniques, you'll want a watercolor paper or a Bristol board, but make sure it's got a smooth finish so that you can stamp on it well. Now, if I am going to color directly on the paper, I make sure I choose a very light shade of marker, like this really pale gold. That way it will look great when I color it. Really dark markers, I like to scribble on my palette first. I really like the way this turned out, but I feel like it needs a little bit of something on the bottom to kind of ground it. So what I'm doing here is tearing a Post-it note right on the sticky band area, and I'm going to place that to kind of cover part of the sky. And then I'm just going to use a sponge to apply some Distress Oxide ink to the bottom. Now, I decided I would try these fancy store-bought sponges because I bought them a while ago. I wanted to see how they compare with my homemade ones. And honestly, what I've kind of realized is it just depends on what you're used to. I don't think the store-bought ones are any better than the homemade ones, but I'm sure it's all whatever you are accustomed to using that's going to give you a better result. So I'm hacking away with this with this tool I've never used before in my life, and I am getting myself some green grass color down here at the bottom. So I did find that I like, just like with my other sponge tools, I like to either start off the paper on my scrap pad that I have down or on the Post-it note and drag it down just so I don't get any weird lines, any lines that are weirder than what I already have there. But I'm not going for perfection here. I actually want a little bit of texture. Now, if it wasn't for that thumbprint in the sky, I could just leave that just the way it is, but since I did get a smudge in the sky, I decided I would use some of this Broken China, I believe it is, Distress Oxide ink to just get a little blue up there in the sky and disguise my sloppy stamping ways. I wasn't thrilled with the way my sky was turning out, so what I did was I took my stamp pad and squished it onto my acrylic block to make my little palette, and I used a wet brush to kind of fill in some of the areas around my birdhouse and just kind of smooth out the sky a little bit. The cool thing about the Distress Oxides, kind of like the Distress inks, is that you can spread out the ink after you've put it on your paper, so nothing is permanent right off the bat, and I really liked that. And I also like the painterly look it gives me in the sky, so go ahead and experiment. It's only a piece of paper, so you might as well have fun and learn something. Once the background was dry, I grabbed this chicken stamp from the Farmyard Animals set, and I stamped him right on the left-hand side of the paper. Since it's facing left, I figured it can have a little row of chiclets following him. Her, it would be a her, right? A hen would be a her, across the barnyard. And I thought that was just the most fun and delightful way to set up our little pantry, and so delightful. I just absolutely loved it. Now, the reason I'm stamping in archival ink here is because I'm going to want to lift out some of the color behind the hen so I can recolor it. So you got to make sure it's dry. So I am using my heat tool just to be absolutely certain that that archival ink is dry. And then I'm going to use a wet brush to simply lift out that ink. So Distress Oxides kind of turn white and frosty once you wet them. So I was very easily able to just paint over some water, and what that does is it lifts off the Distress Oxide ink and it leaves the archival ink there because that was a waterproof ink, and then you can just blot it to remove any moisture. And now I'm just going in with a light yellow marker and coloring in my hen and my chicks. Now, the cool thing about water-based markers is that you can use them with any other water-based markers that you have. So if you have Memento markers or Spectrum Aqua markers or Winsor & Newton markers like this one is here, you can use them all together. You will notice that some brands blend better than others, but they're all essentially related and they'll work well together. Now, this is kind of what I told you about some of the markers just being so vibrant, and it can be kind of tricky to use them straight, you know, right off the marker tip. So when I went in there and I made a few grasses with that Winsor & Newton green, it was just so bright that I had to go in with a wet brush and just kind of blend it around. I know the Winsor & Newton markers blend really well, so it wasn't a big deal, but it was definitely a surprise. I didn't expect that marker to be that bright, but this is what you can do if you find yourself in that same predicament. Just make sure you use it somewhere else so you make it kind of go with everything else. And now to kind of tone down that a little bit more, I'm taking the same ink that we had sponged on the bottom of that card, and I pressed it on my palette, and I'm just using that to go in and to kind of paint in some grasses, and it just helps make everything mesh and blend together. So you do something once, it's a mistake, but if you do it a couple times, it looks like you meant to do it. So that's kind of my card making and art philosophy. I still felt like I wanted some more defined grasses, and I found a marker that was a little closer to what I was going for, this one by Memento, and so I went in and just sketched on a few grasses here and there in the bottom of my my card here, and then just to carry that color around, I went in the window box area and just kind of dabbed in a few of the white spots with that light green color just to kind of will fill in, make it look a little more full in the window, in the flower box, but also just to make it look you know, a little bit more matchy to the ground. And there you can see the panel is all colored, and I'm going to let that dry and we can work on the rest of the card. I had a scrap of Kraft cardstock left over from making my card base. You'll see that in a second. And I thought it would be cool to emboss it with this Hexagon embossing folder, because honestly, Hexagon looks really close to chicken wire, and I don't have a chicken wire embossing folder, and I thought this will do. So what I'm doing is still trying to get used to those blending sponges, which actually they're kind of nice because they're big. So I think for doing large backgrounds, they're going to be really awesome. And so what I'm doing is just inking up this piece of Kraft cardstock with shades of Distress Oxide ink that I've already used. Again, keep repeating the colors throughout your whole card design, and that's how things start to look really slick and professional. The more you repeat those colors, the more intentional it looks. So I used a combination of the blue, the green, and the red of Distress Oxide inks to just fill in this brown Kraft cardstock. And you're probably thinking, Lindsay, why are you doing this? It's not going to show up really well because it's Kraft. But the cool thing is about the Distress Oxides is that they are opaque. So, and especially when you spray them with water, because the opaque pigments start to come up, and it gives you kind of like just a frosty white look, and it's just really kind of cool, and you'll see that as soon as we dry it here. Then after that was dry, to enhance the look of the chicken wire fence, I simply used a brown ink. This is Vintage Photo to ink over the raised areas of the embossed cardstock here, and I think it looks really fantastic. Then I trimmed this panel in half the long way, and I went in with that same blending sponge, except I picked up some archival ink in it because that one's just a little darker. Doesn't really matter. You could use any darker brown ink. And I just re-inked it up again so I'd get a little bit of color on the edges and also make the chicken wire look a little bit more intense. I decided that my card base, which basically is a sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, I cut it at 5.5 inch the long way, so I'd end up with a 5.5 by 5.5 inch card. And I am just inking the edges here with the archival ink, and then I'm going in and inking it with the Vintage Photo because the Distress Oxide just blend better and give me a better kind of like rouging around the edges. I just like to look better, but you can do whatever you want because it's your card. Now we can get this show on the road and build our cards. So I took those 2 strips of the honeycomb, which I think actually look so cute, and I adhered them to each edge of my card base. So this is a 5.5 by 5.5 inch card, remember? So those strips are about 1.5 by 5.5 inches. And then I looked at my stamp panel, isn't that cute? And I decided that would go really great on some red and white polka dot paper. All the pattern paper I'm using is from the My Sunshine stack from Die Cuts with a View, in case you're looking for it. The great thing about using papers, it all come from the same collection, Ordinate. So if you find one piece of pattern paper you like, generally the other ones will go with it. So it's a time saver, and I also think these particular papers look very country and go with this theme really well. So I'm using my little mini trimmer to trim this down, and the complaint I have about this trimmer is that actually all of my trimmers, I have to tell you this because some people have recently told me that they have like 30 paper trimmers because they keep looking for that perfect paper trimmer, and it is my honest belief that there is no perfect paper trimmer, because I have 3 paper trimmers. I have this mini one, I have my portable one that goes to scrapbook crops with me, and then I have my guillotine one that I use 90% of the time, and none of them are absolutely perfect. So I trim it, I call it good. If it's a 32nd of an inch off, life's too short to be bothered by that, in my opinion. So with this pretty yellow paper, the chevron design, I wanted a thicker mat. So I'm just going to go right ahead and adhere the matted stamped piece right on top of that. I just look at I just line it up to one side, figure out how much border I want, stick it down, and trim off the other pieces. Sometimes you'll see, like, especially if you're cutting into a 12 by 12 paper, you'll have like some distressing on an edge, or sometimes it won't be completely consistent because it's meant to be a 12 by 12 piece of paper. So it's good to kind of move it around on the page and find exactly where it is you want either your pattern to line up or the colors to be. I hope that made sense. If not, I apologize. And I think it now looks pretty good centered right up in the middle of the page. I also had this print from that same pad of paper, and I thought that'd be nice kind of down the middle because it incorporates that kind of dusty navy blue and that olive green and that faded barn red. So what I did was I trimmed it to 5.5 inches long, and then that's too wide, but I didn't want to trim it just didn't have a straight edge, so I decided to tear it. Now, if you tear towards yourself, you're going to get the a white decal on your left-hand side. So what you can always do is just tear away and tear towards and see which tear you like better. And I did that so that I would have that down the middle. I realized that I didn't pay attention to the orientation of that paper because I got some sideways tulips there, but you're not going to notice when I stick my mat down. It's so funny when I voice over a card, I see all these mistakes that I wasn't even aware of when I was making the card. But we could share a funny moment, can't we? There's lots of funny moments, I think. I think that looks great. You don't even notice sideways tulips. They're all covered up, so that's good. And something else I like to add to kind of vintagey, country looking cards is baker's twine. You could also use jute if that's what you had. I thought I didn't have very much green in this, so it would be pretty to get the green in there, and I'm too lazy to be bothered to tie a knot, so I'm just sticking the end of the baker's twine into that adhesive I put in the middle, and I'm just going to wrap it around 3 times just so I get some nice little peaks of the string coming out from the edge. And if you are like me and have a massive hoard of baker's twine that you can't part with, this is a great way to use some of it up. And then I'm simply going to trim it and just make sure that wherever that string passes on the adhesive, I just press it down, and that's usually plenty to hold that string in place because it's not pulled really, really tight, and it shouldn't come undone. So to adhere this panel to the middle of my card, I'm going to use my trusty old foam squares because you know I've got a bunch of them if you've been following my channel for any amount of time. Here's a quick tip. If you're working with foam squares, don't press it down to your card really hard until you're sure that you have it where you want it. Because after I pressed my panel down, I realized it was about 1/8 of an inch too far to the left. But at that point, it was stuck, and that was where it's going to be. So to counteract a lopsided card, you just need to add an embellishment on the opposite side. I simply grabbed a couple strips of pattern paper that were just sitting on my table, left over from trimming those mats, and I V-notched the wider one and cut the other one at an angle, stacked them up, and poked a brad through them to adhere them together, and then just flattened the legs of the brad against the back of that little embellishment there. Then I wanted to have a sentiment on it, and I always need more thank you cards, so I stamped the word thank you on another strip of pattern paper. It was actually the back side of one of those leftover scraps, so I didn't have to waste anything here. And then I simply cut out the little thank you, and I thought that looked pretty good. I wasn't sure if I was going to ink it at this point, but I wanted to notch it out so it looked kind of like a little banner, and I thought that would look kind of cute layered up with those other papers. Now, because I'm going kind of overlapping the mat or the focal point, which is raised up with foam squares, I needed to kind of give a little foundation to the bottom of this little strip. So I trimmed some foam squares a little skinnier, and I put them across the bottom of that embellishment strip, and then I put one big square right on top of the prongs of the brad, and that will kind of anchor that side of it. So basically, so it doesn't get crushed or dented or look sloppy after I'm done putting everything together. Now, I bet you can't even tell that that mat was not centered up on that card, can you? See, a little trick of the eye. Now I'm looking to see how that little sentiment looks layered up, and I think it looks good, but I would like a little color, so I'm using my little handmade dauber because it's smaller and easier to get around, and just adding some color to it. I started with just the edges to see how that looked, but then I got a little carried away. So you can do whatever you want on your card. I like that the Distress Oxide inks are a little blendable, so I could go over with a tissue and kind of smudge some of it around and remove some of it at the end there. And then I just put some adhesive on the back. You can see how it was the back of that sideways tulip pattern paper, and I'm just gluing that right on top where I want it to be. And that's all there is to this card. It's a lot of fun. You don't have to do as many techniques if you don't want to, but it's nice to know one in case you want to use them. I want to thank you so much for watching today and encourage you to check out our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them online at pegstamps.com. Remember, 25% off distressed inks with the coupon code DISTRESS25 through Monday, or you can use the coupon code Lindsay17 to save 20% on your Peg Stamp order of $10 or more. I'll put all that information in the video description, including links to everything I used today. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting!